What's up, everybody? This is Kevin, aka The Geek here, and I'm going to take us through basically our NASCAR tools, but mainly this is supposed to be a tutorial for our NASCAR DFS optimizer through the Domination Station. But I'm going to take you guys through a little bit of the entire process of setting up lineups for NASCAR using the Domination Station and our VIP tools. So, let's start with a quick look at the Domination Station. Here we go. We go directly, we click on our Domination Station link, and we are there. Alright, now, NASCAR is a DraftKings sport, so to select NASCAR, here we go. Select DraftKings, NASCAR, pick up the slate. This one is the Indianapolis Brickyard 400. The date is July 23rd right now, and I am literally sweating out this race as I do this video. So I figured this was a good distraction from watching all of the action. So here we go. Now, this is the basic format of our Domination Station optimizer. You're going to choose your sport, choose your site, choose your slate, and then we have these options. So salary range. If you look at what this does is it basically eliminates players in the pool that are beyond these ranges. So if for some crazy reason you didn't want any low salary players in there, you would raise this up. And if you look here, it will raise up your My Exclusions and remove all of the players under 5,500 or over 10.6, which are none, from your pool. We can sort our list that way. We can also sort it by fantasy points range. So if they're projected to score, this will come in handy in other sports where there are massive player pools, much more so than NASCAR. But we can set it based on projections, and it will exclude or allow players from all these different projections. Here's where we set the number of lineups. So again, 1 to 200, which is our max. Comes in really handy in NASCAR because this is definitely the type of sport that we want to attack with mass multi-entry if possible. Next we have our sort, or basically this decides what you will do your optimization by. So really, fantasy points is your settings as a user. I might change it. Let's see, DFS Army points, that's our standard baseline projections, but you might change them a little bit. So normally I leave this at fantasy points, but there is something to be said for if you set out all of your own sort of things, but then you kind of want to see what would happen if I use the DFS Army settings without any adjustments. You can jump right back without having to change your settings. This setting here is the number of unique players per lineup. This is very, very important. And dependent on how you choose to set up your distribution, you want more uniques if you want more diversification. So, this depends on every single slate and each sport and what you're going to do. But basically, the higher this number, the more diversification you have, the more players you'll use from the pool, and so on and so forth. Now, very important for NASCAR, our Dominator stacking options. Every race in NASCAR has its own unique flavor. Some of them are races where there isn't a lot of place differential movement. Some of them have a ton of it. Some of the restrictor plate races have a completely different strategy where we almost want to avoid cars in the front row. So this allows you pretty much to determine how much of the top 10 or 12 drivers that are considered potential dominators you want in each lineup. So we can choose at least, exactly, or at most, and however many players we want to use for that position. This is a uniquely DFS Army concept. No one else, as far as I know, has done this or come up with this. And basically we came up with it because I play NASCAR, and I'm like, I need to, some races I want to definitely lock in 2 dominators, and there's really or definitely lock in no more than 1, and there was no way to do it in any other way other than really, I could not figure it out. So that is why we came up with that option. Now, onward to the player pool. Let's just go back to the original settings here, as you're currently looking at the settings that I have put, but actually we'll leave it that way. So if we look at our player pool, here's what we got. We have our player name. The first thing I like to do is sort by their starting position. First through 40th right there. Now you have your player names. Their salaries, starting position. Are they a Dominator? And usually, again, we that's our arbitrary selections that we and our coaches are putting together who we think are potential Dominators. This week, for example, there really aren't that many because we kind of took Logano off the potential Dominator list for now. He hasn't dominated any races. These guys are kind of lower level drivers. So, we came up with 5 potential Dominators in this race. And again, we are setting a rule that we want at most 1 Dominator in our lineups. So that's going to make sure that we don't take 2 of these top 5. And again, though, I kind of like, it doesn't matter strategy for this week. Some races will want at least 1 player as opposed to at most, and allow it to make 2. So that is, when you use the at most function, it might not use 1 player, it might use none. So, you can also use exactly. And that's kind of why that gives you the flexibility that it just allows you to create your own unique lineups. Now, again, looking through our columns, salary, starting position, we can sort by that, Dominators. Now, here we have our practice stats. So this is really helpful, a nice visual tool to use as you're making your lineups. You can see, Kyle Busch. Now, normally there's 10 lap averages here. This week they didn't produce or run 10 laps for some reason, so we don't have anything there. But normally we do have, the 10 lap column. And they are conveniently shaded so that we can kind of see what's good. Who looks good this week and who doesn't. Who's fast and who's slow and whatnot. So Eric Jones, number 1. And then as we go down the list, this becomes much more handy in the mid-levels. Like, for example, this week, you look at Casey Canyon, you're like, ooh, that guy's got a fast car, 4th and 9th, but he's starting 19th. This is the kind of player that you want to use. Kyle Larson, 5 and 15th, but he's starting 25th. That is a player we want a lot of exposure to, as you can see. Actually, I cleared it, so good. You don't have to see my distributions. And so on and so forth. So one of the things I like to do is you kind of look down this list to identify value, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Here's AJ Allmendinger. I didn't even get to this column, but this is their Vegas win odds. And I use that a ton personally, especially at the bottom end of the range. So what am I doing here? I'm looking, I'm saying, oh, Dinger, well, he practiced a lot faster than 39th. And oh my goodness, look, everybody else around him has these horrific odds of winning, but Dinger is 300 to 1 odds, which isn't the best. I mean, he ain't going to win, but at least it shows us he's better than the rest of the people around him. And those are the kind of drivers that we want to target as our value plays. Cheap, decent odds, better odds than the people around him. That's a value play. We look for a guy like AJ Allmendinger starting 39th. He might not go to win the race, but if he can get up to 24th, he's going to put up a massive score for a cheap salary. All right, so to continue on with these columns, we have our fantasy points per dollar, which is a measure of value, and it is something that's based on our projections. So I do like to sort by this on occasion just to see who the projections love this week, and you can take a look here and you kind of get a sense of who the value plays are, who our projections like very much, and our projections are based off of track history, recent form, Vegas odds. We use a number of factors to create these. Again, 100% custom DFS Army projections, which have led to first place finishes, massive cashes. It's been awesome. So anyway, to continue. Then we have our odds next to our projections. Again, we're going to sort back to starting position. You have our win odds here, and this gives you an idea of who Vegas likes the most to win. And again, this is where, for me, we can identify our chalk plays. If you look at your Dominator crew and you see Truex Jr. and Busch are 4-1 odds to win, you're like, well, I should have a lot of exposure to these two. And then you kind of get a sense of, all right, we'll get some Kenseth in there, we'll get some Elliott, all of these odds-on potential winners. Larson, he's starting 25th, but he's 5-1 odds to win. That's pretty damn good for a 25 starter. We don't need him to win from the 25th spot because just moving up to 5th place will give him 5th place points plus 20 differential points. and any fast laps or whatever else he gets along the way. So we want a lot of him. I'm pretty sure I have 100% of Larson, or very close to it this week. So that is our odds. On to fantasy points, and this is our adjustable version of the fantasy points. So this is where you as a user will adjust the odds, and usually I use this to manipulate the player pool to do what I want to do. All right, we have a couple minutes left in this video, so I'm going to go into one of my favorite new features, exposure min and exposure max, and this is spectacular as far as feature goes. You know, one of the toughest things in DFS, especially in mass multi-entry, is making sure that you have just the right exposure to, particularly your punt plays, your studs, everything. You want to be able to, as a player, set those. Now, since this is a tutorial, I'm going to show you. Obviously, the first thing you do is set the exposure. So here I have your max set at 60 for Kyle Busch, but we want a lot of Kyle Busch. He's starting at the pole, so we'll go 50, 60% here, right? And I'm just going to show some interesting situations where I use this. There are occasions where we want to force the tool to use some of the punt plays. Like, let's say I really like Allmendinger, but he's not showing up. I don't want to go crazy with this thing. I might put 30% min, 50% max exposure, and that'll get us exposure, hopefully, to this driver. Now, obviously, sometimes, you know, we as users can plug in all kinds of crazy numbers. It doesn't always work out, because we might try to force the tool to create lineups that it is not possible to create, and it will tell us that if that's the case. But there we go. So, all right, so we're going to set it for 50 lineups right now, just to show one unique player. Hit the optimize button, and I want to give you a sense of how quickly this happens. We are running, and notice here, this is very important. I don't talk about it a lot, but the Domination Station gives us a running tally of the players it's using, and the reason we set it up that way is so that you can watch. What we don't want to have happen is for it to use, let's say, Kyle Larson in the first 70 lineups if it's going to go, or in the first 70% of lineups if we have them limited, and then not in the next 30. We want the tool to mix and match the drivers really evenly. So part of that means running it without too many parameters, watching what happens, making adjustments to the projections before we try to force the tool to do what we want using min-max exposures. Like, let's say here, all right, I'm just going to use an example of Ryan Newman. Okay, we got 4% Ryan Newman. Well, let's say I want 10% Newman. We're only getting 4. The first thing to do is maybe raise up his projection a little bit. Let's go 31.5. But the other thing I can do is simply 10 and then 12. So hopefully we will get a 10 to 12% exposure to Ryan Newman in this next run. And let's see what happens. Boom, 12%. That is the power of the Domination Station Optimizer. It's going to give you the ability not just to optimize based on our best in-breed projections. These are projections that have led to first place finishes. But to control it yourself and to create the type of player distributions that you want and prefer. Now, once you finish making all your lineups, you feel comfortable with them, you're going to select all, download, and you can use the file you downloaded to upload directly onto DraftKings and set up your distribution. One thing, let's see here. You know, you can remove players from the pool and adjust the odds right here in the side box, which is something I like to do a lot. One of the ways I like to manipulate the tool is I look and I see Ryan Blaney's only 2%. Maybe I want more. So rather than use the min-max settings, I'll go to 46 and kind of see what happens. Again, if you have the time, and I spend hours doing my distributions, but when you have the time, it is much better to do it this way because it will mix and match in the drivers in a more organic way and in a more spread out way than forcing it with the min-max tools. That's not to say not to use the min-max tool. It's awesome, and hell yeah, you want to use that. But here, Blaney, so I raised up his projection. Now he's at 15%. And that 15 was spread through because I didn't force it. That's it for the NASCAR Domination Station tutorial. Really excited